I've admired your work for many, many years. And I have to say, my first John Waters movie was Serial Mom. My parents were huge Kathleen Turner fans, so they brought home every VHS that had Kathleen Turner in it, even the ones we
Yeah,
probably shouldn't watch at that age. But that one, I remember thinking,
but that's my best movie, I think, and I think it's a good entry one for an
yeah,
adult. Uh,
right.
Turner made a lot of weird movies, actually.
No, it was so wonderful, and that's what set me off. Once I saw that, I was like, "This is wonderful. I want to see more of what this director is making," and that set me off on the journey back through your filmography from there. And yeah, it was a great, as you said, great entry point.
Dropped you back into the worst past.
Exactly. You corrupted me in the best possible way. I'll always thank you for
Turned
that.
out
Well, look, we're here talking about Hairspray though, and which is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. And I think what's so interesting to me about it is it feels like your career had sort of two distinct phases. You had your early films, your guerrilla films in the 60s and 70s, the sort of crazy, wild, ambitious thing that you were doing, and then in the late 80s, you shifted into this studio phase that you did, where you're working with big actors and in major studios and things. Was that conscious on your part? Did you recognize Hairspray as
it was a slow crawl. I started with underground movies, went to Midnight, then Independent, then Hollywood, then slid back down to Hollywood Underground at the very end, I think. I made all kind of movies. I always thought they were commercial. I always wanted to make money. I always thought ad campaigns. I always when I was writing Hairspray, I didn't write it to be suddenly a commercial movie.
Mhm.
I did write it that it was not going to be a midnight movie. So Polyester was written, the first one, kind of like that. But when we got a PG rating, I thought I'm going to kill myself. It was the worst possible thing. But it turned out to be the best possible thing because it was more of a shock that I made a PG movie than it would have been if I had made another R movie.
Yeah, people are like, a PG John Waters movie. What does this look like? So
I always said it's the most devious movie. It's snuck in America. We have drag queens, interracial dating, and even Florida hasn't pitched yet.
that's right. It's interesting. Your early films certainly capture an era, capture a time, and you're shooting much in that moment and capturing as it is. Why did you feel ready in 1987, 88 to go back and recreate that time instead of sort of making a movie of the time?
Well, it just happened to be an obsession I always had. And I had, for Baltimore Magazine, covered the reunion of the Buddy Dean show, which was
Mhm.
all the people I remember being on the committee, which it was really called on the show. And I went to it and I was amazed to see all the stars that were local stars. It was only the Buddy Dean show was only in Baltimore. We never had American Bandstand. We were the only place that didn't. And so to see them all, that gave me the idea. And seeing them all doing the dances again and everything, that definitely sparked the idea of having a big girl on the show, which there never ever was. Mary Lou, who is maybe the most popular girl who was on Buddy Dean, who is my friend today, she was really Amber in real life, and her mother was Edna. If we, it's all based on fiction. It's fiction, but it's all based a little bit on truth. And I guess Tracy was me because I went to all the integration rallies and everything
Mhm.
because we had George Wallace running for president in the primaries here, one of the most notorious racists. So a little bit it was all for me, but it just happened. It just happened. And it just was once I had an obsession that didn't scare people.
Mhm. Was it different for you sort of recreating an era again, because the polyester did that a little bit, but it was in the context of the 80s. You're using film techniques to 50s film techniques in the 80s, but here you were actually creating this old time period. Was that a new challenge for you?
I left that very much to Vincent Perennia, who has done all the production design for all my movies. He's my age. He knew Buddy Dean. He grew up here. There isn't that much leftover footage from Buddy Dean, but he knew it well. He
Right.
knew he was from the neighborhood where a lot of the kids were from, the blue collar neighborhoods. He totally understood the look. And I remember too. So, yes, even some of the people that were originally on the Buddy Dean show that helped us during the making of the film. When they saw the set, they said that there was like the Twilight Zone. They couldn't believe that they were back. It was so close in so many ways, and the hairdos and everything. Chris Mason, who did all the hair, she grew up in Baltimore around that era. She remembers those hairdos, which were not considered extreme at the time.
Mhm.
You went in certain neighborhoods with your mother, and you both got your hair done every week in those giant hairdos. That was in my neighborhood, it was not cool. In some neighborhoods, it was. And then it started to be you were either Joe College, which meant you ironed your hair, or teased hair. And there was a battle between. And when it finally went off the air, it was the ironed hair kids that fought for integration. And it ended because integration was stuck on Black Day, not White Day. They were expecting that. But everybody, the white kids snuck on Black Day, as they called it Negro Day at the time, which they actually did. And that was respectful then. Negro was not a big, but Black would have probably been offensive. Well, right. Yeah, probably it could have been. Yeah. So it was, and Fat Daddy was the disc jockey from Baltimore that every white kid listened to on WSID radio. And he hosted Negro Day, as they called it, or now today they said they called it Special Guest Day. I don't remember anybody ever calling it that.
Right. So selective bit of editing now.
On African American Day, there was no Black regulars. There was no committee members that were on every time because they only had it once every couple of weeks. So, but they never had regulars that were on there. They had the Blacks. They didn't have the Black stars that would be the same as the white ones.
Speaking of your evolution as a director, I think someone like you who starts out making your own movies, guerrilla style in the beginning, you can still see a clear stylistic evolution as you're going along. When you get to Hairspray, you're doing some really great things with first-person POV shots, and the sort of recreating the tracking in a live TV. How conscious were you about your direction?
Well, I got the camera away from me because I was never a good cameraman. Dave Inslee shot that movie, and he did a great job. In the beginning, I did everything. I was the sound person. I did everything. In the beginning, they were silent, and we put in sound later. So I learned while I was doing it, and I eventually was very happy to have someone else shoot them, not me.
Right. Do you, speaking of casting, so certainly Ricki Lake, I listened to an interview with her that she did on Julie Klausner's podcast recently. She was saying that when she was cast, Divine actually was not happy that she was Tracy because Divine wanted to play Tracy and the mother. Is that your memory? Was Divine interested in doing both parts?
In the beginning, when I wrote it, we were kind of doing a joke on The Parent Trap where Divine was going to play the daughter and the mother. New Line said no to that wisely when they gave the money. Because Divine was like 40-some years old. It would have been funny. It would have been a whole different movie. But who knows if it would have gone as far. And so Divine loved Ricki right from the beginning. I think at first he was a little, he wasn't the star of the movie in a way. Well, he certainly was one of the stars, but Ricki was the star of the movie. It was about her. And he got along with her very well. They became like mother and daughter in real life. I mean, he taught her how to walk in heels. They made pies together. I mean, they were definitely very, very friendly.
Was Divine disappointed with you when you said no? We're not letting you do both. Like, was he really sold on that idea and then was a little angry?
Well, no. I mean, he was so happy that we were getting the movie made with a real budget. We had like $2 million. It was going to be a real movie. We had like lights, we had food, we had trailers, things like that we had never ever had before. So at first he was a little disappointed, but he got right into it. And I think he knew, and he had two parts in it. He also played the man that was the racist radio station owner. And Divine realized, I think, that he already had this image that we had created of this really frightening person that was in Pink Flamingos and Female Trouble, which Divine in real life was not like. But when he turned around and played a frumpy housewife, that's when he got great reviews. And I still say Dolly Parton would get out of drag and play a junkie. She'd win the Oscar the 5 seconds.
Right.
When you go against type that radically, it always works.
Right. Because people are so surprised that you're not doing what you normally do. And so, right. It just, yeah.
As Divine said the first day on the shoot, I didn't recognize him on the set. I thought it was one of the neighbors. Wow. And he said, what drag queen would allow themselves to look like this? And he's kind of correct. Even today.
It's so interesting your choice of Ricki Lake and Tracy being full figured. Certainly, the Hairspray came out at the end of the '80s, and the first part of the decade had been defined by the physical fitness boom. Jamie Lee Curtis in Perfect, Jane Fonda's workout video, and all that. Were you consciously reacting against that? I know you mentioned it was also part of the show at the time. That part of it.
React to that. I always had good luck. Well, you can't say fat now, but we said even then an ample girl. That's what we called it. I always had luck with big women. Divine was in all my movies. Ricki, yes. And to this day, wherever I go, ample women like to hug me because of the movies. So I'm happy about that. And this was, as Mary Lou told me, the girl that was really Amber, she said a black girl could have gotten on easier than a fat girl because not one ever auditioned, not one ever went down there to even try to be on the show. And when we put out a casting ad, only about 10 showed up, and Ricki Lake immediately got the part. But later, when they did a big version later for NBC, a different old version of the musical, and they had open casting, probably 1,000 big girls showed up. So it made them feel that they could be the star of a movie. And I think that was the important politics of that movie, because not only did the character of Tracy Turnblad, she got the guy and she won. She was not a supporting character. She was not the good friend that was funny and made wisecracks. She was the star, and she got the guy and won. Right. The handsome guy.
You can definitely see a clear arc, I think, from Tracy to someone like Lizzo now, who's
I think Divine has really had more to do with Lizzo, because Lizzo used the weight to shop, and fashions and everything. And Divine did that too. In the very beginning, drag queens hated Divine because they were so square and straight, and Divine would show up with fake scars, carrying a chainsaw and stuff. And they knew he was making fun of drag, which he was in a way. He was satirizing how straight it was. And so I think Divine and Lizzo were more on the same page. And now Lizzo has influenced all of America, where everyone's nude in the airport. Right. I mean, I can't believe people's outfits on the airports when they get on the plane. Well, just completely nude. So I'm for an all nude airline. That's next. All you have to wear is belts. Right.
I think that's where the industry needs to go. That sounds right. I like it. Ricki Lake also talked about a deleted scene in her interview, the roach scene, the famous roach scene, and doing that.
Her hair loss on me, which I give her so much grief about. How come nobody else's hair fell out that was in the movie? She had bad hair genes. It was teased for real, yeah. But there was a scene in it. It was based on, there was a girl named Pixie that was on the real Buddy Dean show. And she was about 4'8", but her hairdo was so high that if there was it blocked the moon if you were out. It was an eclipse. And but she just stopped being on the show for no reason. And everybody thought, where's Pixie? And the rumor spread that roaches lived in her hair, eating off the hairspray, and it killed her. And people believed it. And it went so wide that Buddy Dean had to come on the air and say it wasn't true, make an announcement. So I was giving homage to that particular scene. But at the time, we did put real roaches in her hair. And she freaked out. I don't know why. I mean, big deal. But anyway, she did freak out some. And later, Bob Shea, who was the head of New Line, was correct in saying to cut the scene. He said, what is this, suddenly a Benwell film or something, right in the middle? Which is true. It was jarring, the plot point, But yes, there were real roaches in her hair. But later, I put real roaches on Liz Renee, naked, crawled over her derriere, and she didn't complain. Her hair didn't fall out.
Well, maybe the 18 is the dividing line. She just couldn't deal with it at that age. I also love your choice, obviously, to cast countercultural icons like Sonny Bono and Debbie Harry as straight upper lace parents. That was a fun bit of casting. How much did they enjoy that sort of changing?
Well, also at the time, Sonny Bono was mayor of Palm Springs, right, and running again, and played a racist. Who would do that today? And Debbie was great. I had seen her in other movies. She had been acting, and I loved her. And she really wanted Sonny, and I think that's one of the reasons he said yes. And also because of Ruth Brown. Sonny Bono started a Specialty Records, which did Little Richard, all rhythm and blues African-American record company that he worked at, that was a talent scout and everything. So he was very much from that world. People think Sonny Bono, the square white guy that was the hairdo, but his roots are definitely in rhythm and blues music. And so he was thrilled that Ruth Brown was going to be in it. And Ruth Brown had just become, on Broadway, she had been a star. So she, coming back from, being broke, and they didn't pay her any of her royalties. And she went to court and won against Atlantic Records. So Ruth was great. I think Sonny just knew that it was a period about music that he knew very well. But he always did say to me, now, everything's in the script, and he feared that somebody was going to run out and eat shit in the middle of the scene. That's what he told me later. But he never asked that. But I said, no, what's in here is what's in the movie. There's no surprise scenes I didn't tell you. And he was a great sport. He was, like everybody, he worked hard on that movie. It wasn't that big a budget. I mean, for us, it was. It wasn't for Sonny Bono. He had giant hit television shows and stuff. When Sonny died, I went on Ted Koppel and said really great things about him. And I had never met Cher. And then I met Cher. She came over to me that year at the Vanity Fair party. And I always think when I see Cher, it's a drag queen, but it was really her. And she was very dressed down, and she was really sweet and said, thank you for saying such great things about Sonny. Because people always made fun of Sonny. I never made fun of Sonny, ever, ever. I thought he was great. And I think everybody in that movie, Tracy Lords was escaping the porno world. Johnny Depp hated being a teen idol. Patty Hearst, who wants to be a famous kidnap victim? She made fun of it by being in a movie. I think everybody was coming to me for career change. It was rehab in a way for reputations. If you embrace and make fun of what they use against you, it doesn't work anymore.
Right. Yeah, because you were clear in on it. Yeah, you're aware of it, right?
Yeah.
Were you surprised when Sonny Bono went into politics in Congress and was a Republican? Did you get that sense of his leanings in that way?
Just kind of. I was surprised. His wife was very nice at the time. I mean, she ran, I think, after he died, right?
Yeah.
We never talked politics. Sonny was certainly, from my memory, not the kind of Republicans that we have today. I don't think, but if he had been a Trumpite, I doubt it. I don't know. People's politics can really surprise you. I knew Roseanne well, and look at her now. I mean, people, they get radicalized either way. I think, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of that, I mean, we talked about Divine earlier. It certainly seems to me that it seems like there are parts of this country today where showing Hairspray in school could potentially land teachers in trouble because it has men in drag. Is that something that's
one? And I think because the plot is not Divine is a man. It's a secret between the audience and the actors. Tracy Turnblad doesn't think her mother's trans. So it's confusing, and I said Hairspray is such a good sneak attack that even racists like Hairspray because they're too dumb to realize it's against them. So no, Hairspray has had no trouble, and I don't think it will. I don't think it will. I think it would be a really stupid thing for them to attack. They'd lose on that one. Even with some of the more radical Republicans, I think, would back down on that one. Now, am I surprised that every once in a while someone is uptight about drag queen storytelling? I just want Dina Martina, who's my favorite drag queen. I want Dina Martina to go in and teach kindergarten detention drag. That's the class I'm for.
Because you and Divine had met in the early 60s, you found each other before drag went mainstream at post Stonewall and things. And living through that and seeing this come back around now, this sort of anti-trans agenda, is it depressing for you? Is it frustrating to see it come back again now?
I don't know. It's ridiculous to me. First of all, children always loved him. They were never scared of him. They thought he was funny. They thought he was like a clown. They liked exaggerated makeup and everything. They were fine with it. I don't understand why people are, I think you go to school to find new ideas, to challenge the ideas that you were brought up with. I don't understand trigger warnings. I don't understand. Then you don't have to be a drag queen. If somebody comes in and shows you drag, that doesn't mean you go home. Now, I guess there is a few. I try to imagine, like, Dad said, how was school today, little Bill? And he said, Miss Hot Mess came in and taught us how to put on bottom lashes. Get it, girl. I mean, I can see the humor in that, and the parents, but the parents I know, a lot of parents I know have reaction for what they're taught in their school today. They don't know what to say either because it's against what they think too. A kid comes on and said, I'm so guilty, I'm white, and the friends I have, they say, well, that's good. Everybody's seeing every different kind of way that you can have. They're getting every different kind of politics. But to me, I don't get whether so. That one really pushes the buttons at things like the drag or trans even more, and I always think, well, what do they think? Like a 8-foot drag queen's going to come in the kiddie bathroom and whip out a 10-inch and take a piss. I mean, I don't get why they're so nervous about it.
Right.
I mean, how's that going to harm anybody? And they say it's laying the stage. Oh, give me a break. So everything you talk about is influential to kids. I got corrupted by the library because I looked up everything I wasn't supposed to know about. And it would say, see librarian. And I go find that book. So the library is supposed to corrupt you. Books are supposed to take you into a world that maybe you want to go to and your parents don't. The same way music, the first record that you love that your parents hate, that's the soundtrack of your life, just began. So I think it's very important to find out things on your own. I think if any child comes in a library, if he's 5 years old and asks for the Marquis de Sade, if he's heard of it, give it to him.
Right. He has the right to read it then.
Yeah.
Certainly you allude to the fact that racists don't get angry at Hairspray because they're too stupid to realize it. And
I'm joking, but
yeah, right.
I've had that happen. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But what's funny about it too is like there is that pushback now as well against in certain states the idea to resegregate Black students, or at least push not fully give voice to their history. And I think it's interesting to me that you were ahead of the curve on that about really putting that in that movie, making it a strong part of that movie. And it still resonates now.
The reason it worked is because I wasn't preaching. Mm-hmm. I wasn't making the other side feel stupid. I was using humor to get your attention. I was making fun of liberals too, certainly. Mm-hmm. I always have. I make fun of the rules that liberals live by, because that's the rules I live by, not my parents anymore. So all rules to me are interesting to break for some reason. And for movies and for art and photography, everything, rules are the basis of all humor. And stand-up is what can you get away with and all. So Hairspray was a message movie that never once preached or got on a soapbox. It was, and people never even realized it was a message movie. That's why I say, and I didn't make it to be one. I just made a movie about a subject I knew and an experience that I had had, and tried to tell it in a humorous way that wouldn't seem like I was on a soapbox, which eventually just makes people go the other way, I think.
I love the line towards the end of the movie where Tracy tells Link, "Oh, our souls are black." That whole exchange is great. I mean, it's cringy in a sense, but it's also very much what a teenager would say, and that I think that gets to what you're talking about. That
you might get in trouble for saying that. That's Rachel Dolezal. Or Sasheen Littlefeather, who wasn't really an American Indian. All these people. So that was an irony too that I based on in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. All the white kids, even racist, and even the racist parents that didn't want the show integrated, listened to Black music. They listened to soul music. And I thought, well, I don't get it. How can you be prejudiced if you're listening to Otis Redding all day? I don't get it. It's so, to me, that is a purposeful thing I did put in there. The fact that even on the Buddy Dean show that was not integrated, most of the music was Black that was played.
I love seeing Josh Charles featured so prominently too. I always forget that he's in there. Was that one of his first movies? I believe it was. First people to cast him. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and I know his parents. He was great in it, and I still see Josh. And yes, that was his first movie, and look what happened. Yeah, right. Look what happened with Ricki Lake.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, she's talked about how crucial you've been to her throughout her career. What has that been really mentoring her been like as she's gone on and done lots of other things, from talk shows to movies?
Well, she talk show host, nothing to do with me, believe me. And she had huge success with that. She was one of the first ones ever to have that kind of show. And I used to say at the height of her career, her audience was very much African American, So we used to go in airports and I'd say all Black people recognized her and all stewards recognized me. So we would joke about that. But Ricki has kept the movie alive. She's kept it alive. She's in a great Tracy. She was Tracy in a weird way, at the time. But she didn't know who I was. She didn't know who Divine was or anything when she got the part. But she found out quick and embraced it, certainly. And I talked to Ricki yesterday. I'm still friends with her. And she's smart, beautiful, lovely. And I didn't make her hair fall out.
Divine passed away not long after the movie came out. Losing him at that time, was it harder knowing that how good he was in the movie and how it could have opened up a whole different phase for him?
Well, he died about a week afterwards. He read all his good reviews. He knew the movie was a hit. That's better than dying a week before and not knowing.
Right.
But either way, it's pretty lousy.
Yeah.
Because he had no chance to use. He was about ready to play a gay male character uncle on Married with Children, and Hairspray really helped that, and it would have been a hit, I think. And so the career was just stopped, and it hurt the movie too at the time because we had just been all around the country promoting it. So when Divine died, it was highly covered in the news, but they'd cover me carrying the coffin and cut to Divine dancing. So who wants to go see a comedy where somebody just died, you know? But of course, Hairspray lived on through everything, and I think Divine has influenced all drag queens today. None of them are square anymore. They were all square when I was young. I mean, Christine Jorgensen was great, but she wasn't a drag queen. Though she was the first trans, you know. And the best headline about her ever that would never be allowed today, but it is a good one. It was GI goes abroad and comes back abroad. That's an amazing tabloid headline. You got to give it that.
I know you've said in the past that Divine wasn't precious necessarily about identity and things like that. Would he be in today's landscape? How do you think he would feel about some of the different debates we're having over identification?
Totally for the trans movement. Divine was not one bit trans. He wore expensive men's clothes at the end. He would be a man. He always said he was a drag queen. I called him he in real life, and she if we were making a movie and he was playing a woman character. If he was in full drag, I would say she. I always called him Divine, you know. But no, Divine would be all for that. But Divine, a lot of people think Divine was trans. He wasn't. I always said he didn't want to be a woman. He wanted to be Godzilla. He was thought up to scare hippies. That was the real reason, our mission in the beginning, even though we were in the hippie world, and certainly, but we were making fun of those rules at the same times too.
Yeah, as you were saying, you were an equal opportunity offender. You wanted to get both camps. Yeah.
Well, the right I don't, because they don't come see me. They gave up on me a long time ago. Although that is completely true. I've had people I know that are very conservative in the audience laughing because I make fun of things I love, even if I'm saying something about what I consider our political enemy. I think they might laugh at it too because I make fun of the ones I like on our side too, just as much. But the main reason is I make fun of myself first.
Right. And
that sets the tone where you can maybe make fun of other rules. But you got to, self-righteousness and pretentiousness are the only multiple sins I think you go to hell for.
I feel like if he had lived, you two could have made the ultimate Ron DeSantis biopic, have really taken it to them today. Like I could just see Divine doing that.
If ever Divine was going to play a conservative, I guess in A Dirty Shame, he probably would have been the grandmother who was the head of the Neuters, who was anti-sex. He probably would have had that role if he had been alive.
When you watch Hairspray now, what's the aspect of it that you're happiest with? Is there something that you felt like I really got this right in this?
Well, a lot of times people think as the musical they did such an amazing job, and I was around for all that. I gained such a knowledge of the theater of seeing about how a musical, the steps it goes through to finally open on Broadway and win the Tony is endless and amazing how much work goes into that. So I was very lucky to get an education with brilliant people that did that. I look at Hairspray really is not a musical. It's a dance movie. Crybaby musical. But I think the best thing about it is it inspired so many different things. 4 different versions. You can't do a bad version of it. I've seen it now because of political correctness. We're in the schools that you can't cast by weight, race, or anything. I've seen a skinny black girl playing Tracy. Kids don't care. That's the thing. When they finally do the remake, they should have a little, I don't know, little Naz as Amber. just switch Lizzo as Edna. Just switch everything completely around. Sex, weight, age, everything. And you know what? Kids don't care. So, and I take pride in that the characters can get beyond that, can get beyond your threshold of belief, even if you cast it in such a completely different way. So I think Tracy Turnblad speaks to anybody that's ever been an outsider. And today, almost everybody thinks they are one. I would say that both Trump and Obama would call themselves outsiders. So today, I don't want to be an outsider. I became an insider with Hairspray. I snuck in.
Have you ever seriously thought about revisiting those characters? Would you go back and do Tracy
Oh
in the 80s or?
God, I wrote 3 sequels, Hollywood paid me for. I wrote 1 sequel to the theater one, I wrote 1 sequel to my movie, and 1 is a TV show. And so I've written, oh yes, I have many, many, many of them. Yeah.
And what's been the holdup? Why have
But they never made them. Right.
wow. Is there one reason why they never happened? Was it just the usual Hollywood stuff? Because I would think that would be like a major attraction for people.
Well, there's always different reasons. Well, the Hairspray musical was really insane. There was miracles in it and stuff. One of the Hairsprays was about black and white couples, about how Penny became the one that was in the most trouble for. So it tackled different versions of it. It just wasn't the same thing, but it was the same characters. I think they all would have worked, and everybody else did too. It would just seem like there was always some new reason. Oh, they just sold it to make a different version of it, or this. So I was happy to write them. I lived with those characters and all different music. 3 whole scripts. That's a couple of years, really, of your life. Yeah. So they're in there. I described the plots in my last book, Mr. Know-It-All. So, but who knows? They might get made one day. You never know.
Right. And would you be willing? I mean, the musical obviously was made by separate people. As much you had a hand in it. Would you be willing to give it to the next generation if you're not around to make it or to see it?
Definitely, I would. Yeah. The one of the Hairsprays was them after the show went off the air, and what happened to them when they were older, and how they had to go back to real life, which was very traumatic for a lot of the real kids that were on the show, because that was the height. They were on television 6 days a week, and then it was over.
Right.
What do you do? And I think they had trouble with that. Some of them, definitely. And the 60s happened, so the hairdos, everything was completely out of style. And the world changed so radically in 1964 or so that they were lost. I think a lot of them, and some went into music, some went into show business, but many did not. And I still go to the reunions. I'm still friends with them, and it's great. A few of them said they stopped going to the reunions when they were held in old age homes. But I have seen at the last reunion I went to 75-year-old couples that were famous when they were 15 doing the roach dance perfectly without any irony. And it was beautiful.
Wonderful. Looking back on that era of the 60s now, I mean, the world has changed so much in some ways, not so much in others. What is it about that time period that you wanted to capture specifically? Something about that era that you wanted to recreate?
Well, 1965 was right between the 50s and the 60s, because the hippie whole thing didn't really start till 64, the Beatles and all. So before that, it was still the 50s in a weird way left over. The 50s turned into the big hairdos and all that kind of thing. But it was a short period of time that was caught between 2 very famous styles of decades, that it was like a vacuum that this thing happened in. And that's what interested me. Same way I did Crybaby was right before rock and roll hit, right after Frank Sinatra and right before Elvis, which really means Johnny Ray.
Do you think we're in a time like that now? I mean, it's hard to know until years later, but are we in an in-between now, or when you look around?
The hardest thing is I get Billboard, and no one, no matter what age or what taste, could identify every one of the top 30 albums. They are in so many different genres, sold so many different ways, that no one's heard of all of them. So that's the difference. Both in the 50s and 60s, the top 20 was the same top 20 for any kind of music all over the country. Yes, they had a rhythm and blues. Before that, they called it race music. They had a country chart, but they crossed over to still be the #1 record sometimes, often. So that's the thing today. There are so many genres of music, and there's no one way you buy it. And it's so different today, and you really can't save memorabilia. How do you stream it? What's collectible about that? That's why I still like CDs, which I buy. They're gone. I mean, they don't even have them on computers anymore. So basically, how do you collect? And that's why maybe vinyl's back so big. I don't know. But how you buy it and how you listen to it. I read now that AM radio is shutting down, which to me is truly amazing. Believe me, Hairspray was AM radio. It was not at all. All the stations that those records were on were AM.
You talked about how, you were sort of clawing your way to Hollywood, to the mainstream, and Hairspray was this thing that surprised you. How did it impact the rest of the movies you made after that? I mean, did it set you up for a run that got to include Serial Mom and things like that?
Right after Hairspray, for the only time in my life, every single Hollywood studio wanted to make Crybaby. There was a bidding war, everything. That never happened to me again. That's how much, a lot.
And how did it impact you at all? Just again, as a director, were there things that you learned on that you applied to your future things?
Well, I learned, I liked it. I wanted to go to Hollywood. I wanted to have bigger budgets. I wanted to work with my people and movie stars, put it together. And yeah, I was ambitious. I never wanted to go backwards. And I still don't. I think I don't have it monogrammed on a pillow, but if I was going to monogram anything on a pillow, that's what I'd put. Don't go backwards.
Love it. I think that's the button. Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been
Sure,
really
thank
wonderful.
you. Thank you.